Sorry about that, guys. It said that I had a poor wireless connection, so I actually had to go run upstairs and shut all the windows and hope that I could get a good enough signal so I could broadcast. So apologies for being a little out of breath. So my name is Brian, and this is TANDEMKROSS. Tonight we are going to be disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling the Smith & Wesson SW22 Victory, as well as removing the magazine safety disconnect. Let's go ahead and do a chamber check to make sure that we're clear. And we are. So welcome, guys and gals. Sorry about the rocky start here. Hopefully everything will smooth out. So what we're going to be doing today is taking this apart, cleaning it, as well as removing the magazine safety disconnect so you can fire the gun without a magazine inserted. We already performed a safety check here, so now we're going to use a hex wrench and take it down. I also wanted to mention that this is a live event, and feel free to chime in with questions and I will answer them. I'm also going to be reading the questions out loud. That way, when this turns into a YouTube video, the viewers won't be confused as to what's going on. So we remove the takedown screw, and now we can just wiggle this off of here. All right. Let's pull our bolts out. So earlier this week, I chimed in. Welcome all. Earlier this week, I put a total of 57 magazines through a brand new Smith & Wesson Victory right out of the box. So this has not been cleaned since then, and that video is actually up on my personal channel, the Lawson 11B page. If you want to check that out, about 15-minute video. So what we're going to be doing tonight is cleaning this. But before we clean that, why don't we go ahead and show you how to remove the magazine disconnect. It is very simple. There's a video online about it already by ZRS, another wonderful YouTuber. Kind of jealous of his subscriber count, but that's okay. And sorry, this live session did have a title, but since I had to restart it, I just had to start without a title. So hopefully somebody can go in there and edit the post or something. So we're going to take the right side of the grip off, and you'll see this wonderful magazine safety disconnect. What we're going to do is carefully remove this without dropping the hammer and the trigger. Hey, Scott. Good evening, buddy. So, let's see here. Do I have the right tools? Of course not. So what we're going to do, we're going to start pushing up on here after we release the tension on the spring. There's a little cutout right there, so we're going to pull it up a little bit. Now that spring can ride free. You see that it's already come loose right here. Now we can look down here and give it a little twist. There's going to be a little bit of tension, but not enough to bend anything. So you can see that it's letting go of the trigger bar here. We're just going to pull this guy out of there. There we go. So we flipped it around. Now we can start working it out of the gun here. Come on. Perfect. So we'll set this aside just in case we want to put it back to factory configuration. And be careful of the magazine catch because that goes right here and it can fall out. So now we have no magazine inserted. Let me pull the trigger here. And the trigger works. Awesome. So now we're just going to put this magazine catch back in there. How would I compare this to the 2245? It's quite a bit different than the 2245. It's a little bit heavier, but it's a little bit faster right out of the box. This is a really interesting pistol, and Smith & Wesson bent over backwards to make this the pistol with the lowest learning curve for disassembly and reassembly. What I mean by that is, if you've ever tried to take apart a Buckmark or a 2245, you know that it's got a pretty steep learning curve, whereas this pistol It's very easy to take down and put back together. Extremely accurate. It already comes with a scope rail. The trigger is exceptionally good for right out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and put these grip screws back on. But it is a great gun. You know, not everybody likes a Buckmark or a 2245, and it's nice to have options. Now, before I start cleaning this too, we've been fielding a lot of questions on how to put the upper back on with the halo installed. So what we're going to do here is show you a bit of a paradigm shift. We want to change the way you think about reassembling the gun because it's a lot different than what you're used to. And the halo doesn't actually interfere with reassembly. So we're going to put the bolt back on the frame like so. And you'll see that there's enough room to tilt it up like that. So now we can take our receiver, start sliding it on. I'm having to work around the tripod here. So we're slipping the receiver on. There we go. Now we've got the upper back on with the halo installed. Now all we have to do is reinstall our takedown screw, and we've got it fixed. So let's go ahead and take this off. This is off my other Smith & Wesson 22 Victory. It's the threaded version. It's got the halo and the game changer compensator. There we go. Set this up here. All right. So I'm going to start by cleaning off the upper receiver here. You can see that there's quite a bit of gunk down in there. And like the Ruger 1022, I don't recommend removing the barrel unless you absolutely have to. I mean, there's a generous amount of room here to get in there and clean, so I don't actually remove the barrel. I think it's a bit unnecessary for cleaning, and if you have a red dot on here, it could change your point of impact. So we're just going to leave the barrel on there and start cleaning. Yes, this is somebody said, wow, that was pretty quick to put back together. It really is, especially when you do it that way that we mentioned, where you just put the bolt on, and this works with or without the halo. So you put the bolt on. Ooh, too much caffeine. All right. Do it again here in a minute. All right. It is really, really easy to put back together. So before I start cleaning this receiver with oil, I'm actually going to take a dry Q-tip and just start working around getting all this gunk out of here, because once you get it wet, you can't really go back from being wet. I'm going to get a glass of water too. So what would you do when you're having trouble reinstalling the slide with the halo still on it? Well, the method that I was doing before Brian and Jake let me know about the secret squirrel way to do it was I would take the bolt and put it in the receiver, and then I would start to kind of wiggle it up and down while pulling back on the bolt slightly. And it takes 3 hands to do it, and it wasn't very effective for me. I was able to get it by, putting it on here like this and then trying to rock it like that. There we go. There we go. So what I do is, I'm rocking it up and down like that while kind of pulling back on the bolt a little bit. And that method was working all right for a while, but it is really a lot more simple to leave the slide on there, the bolt if you will, and tilt it up a little bit, and then slide the receiver over it here. There we go. There we go. So there's 2 different methods of doing it, and it can work with and without the halo. It's just a little bit awkward, but not as awkward as some of the other pistols out there, that's for sure. Alright, let's not get everything mixed up. So you can see it's got a pretty wonderful pattern patina of gunshot residue. Put about 570 rounds through this in a little over an hour, and it did really well, especially for a new gun to the market. So let's get back to cleaning here. I'm going to take my dry Q-tips. You're welcome, Scott. Get my dry Q-tips in here. You can see that there's a little bit of residue right there. It's nice to get this out while it's still dry, because once you get it wet, you know, you could make kind of a slurry, and that's kind of a detriment to cleaning here. But this is a really interesting design, and the more that I shoot it, the more I'm getting a kick out of it. And like I said, this gun is a speed demon out of the box. The video where I'm putting the first 500 rounds through this, I started off shooting it kind of slow, and then I really hit the gas on it and was able to, you know, spit out 10 rounds in about 1.5 seconds, and 5 rounds under 3/4 of a second. I think it was 0.71 seconds for 5 rounds. If you take away the reaction time, it was actually like 0.62 seconds, so it is really fast. I'm really looking forward to getting a lighter barrel on the front of this. Alright, so I think we've done all that we can do with dry Q-tips now. So why don't we get some rem oil. This is the stuff that I use just because I go through so much gun cleaning products. I get this at Walmart. It's nice and cheap. Does a good job. I don't really use it to lubricate. I just use it to clean the gun. And then whatever extra I use, I try and save and then put it in a rag. Scott said he thinks it's a user. That may have a little bit to do with it. I haven't watched all of your videos, but have you tried the Volquartsen barrels, and if so, how do they compare to the Smith & Wesson barrels? I have not tried a Volquartsen barrel, but I have a competitive shooter friend, competitive shooter Josh Hansen, who has got the Volquartsen carbon fiber barrel, and it looks like it's pretty light and very accurate. The barrels that are on here are kind of heavy, but that's a good thing. If you're going to be shooting limited, you're not going to be able to run a compensator, and you kind of want some of that weight up front to reduce the muzzle flip. But the Volquartsen barrels, there's the carbon fiber one, which I believe is 5 ounces lighter than the factory. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I think it is. And then they also have a kind of a target barrel with the compensator built in, I believe. But I am waiting for a lighter barrel from Tactical Solutions, actually. I've had good luck running Tactical Solutions barrels on my pistols and rifles, and I'm really looking forward to getting one of their barrels on the front here. Alright, so I think we've got the receiver pretty clean now. You can see that it's pretty shiny. I haven't done any polishing yet, and I don't really think it's necessary to get this gun to run properly. I think the only thing really slowing this gun down is actually the magazines, but I'll go over that later. So now I'm going to take my handy dandy bore snake, one of the best inventions in the shooting world. And it is dry right now. I may put some oil on it after I do a couple of passes. I just want to get whatever's built up. I've been seeing some threads in the Facebook groups of people having lead fill up the barrel. I think it's called leading, and I think they were having that issue with, what was it, Remington Thunderbolts, but Thunderbolts have gotten a lot better over the years. But I did put, most of the rounds that I put through this were actually lead round nose. They weren't copper coated. I did put quite a few copper coated, but a majority of what I shot through here was actually just lead. So it helps to kind of scour the rifling and get all that lead out of there. This is actually a name brand bore snake, because the other two that I had, disappeared from my out-of-state matches, so I'm sure they'll show up somewhere. Alright, let's put a little drop of oil on the back of the bore snake here. And guys, this is really all that I do for cleaning my 22 pistols and rifles. I really just run a bore snake through, and you know, I don't really use the rods because I've got so many guns that are needing cleaning that it doesn't make sense to run a rod through all of them. The bore snake does a good job. I haven't had any problems over the years. Alright, I think I've finally caught my breath. So I put a little bit of gun oil after the brush section just to kind of get whatever we didn't get on earlier passes here. John Alexander says, I have the Volquartsen fluted barrel in stainless, and it is awesome looking and very accurate. I also have the Halo, and it does save some pinched fingers. You know, of all the 22 pistols on the market, I do believe the Halo needs I do believe the Smith & Wesson needs the Halo the most because it has the least amount of purchase for grabbing the bolt. It's got the least amount of surface for grabbing the bolt, and then a really powerful mainspring. So you put those two together and you've got a pistol that can be rather hard to rack. So the Halo really is wonderful on the Smith & Wesson. It really makes it easier to rack it, which equals, you know, safer weapons manipulation at the range. Alright, so we've got the bore snake through here. I don't think I covered this yet, but like my threaded Victory, when I pulled this one out of the box, I did have a little tiny bit of surface rust on the receiver itself, and it's since then gone away. So whatever I do after I'm done cleaning, I just put some oil on the receiver and even on the barrel itself, because I do live less than a mile from the ocean and I don't want rust to show up on this. But you can see a little bit there. You know, hit it with a fingernail and it pretty much comes off. So this might be a good candidate for Cerakoting or Duracoating, nice flat surfaces. I think it'll take really well to it. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this muzzle cleaned off. I'm going to get a little gun oil here. Martin asks, what brand or type of ammo were you using when you were having misfires in the Victory? Believe it or not, out of 570 rounds through the Victory, I only had one failure to fire, and it was with a Gila standard velocity. And when I put it back into the gun and hit it again, it went off. So I do not believe it was the gun, because the case had a really good strike on it. I mean, it was a really powerful strike. So I think they just didn't have enough priming compound, but I've only had one failure to fire in this gun, and you know, I've got almost 600 rounds through it. I do believe if the gun does have a misfire, it's going to be from the ammo, because that mainspring is extremely powerful. But, you know, if the priming compound doesn't make it all the way around the rim, it can result in a failure to fire, regardless of how tough that mainspring is. So we've got that clean. Let's go ahead and take a look at our slide here. This guy is a little dirty, but not that bad actually. It's just kind of on the breech face here. The rest of it looks, oops, well, let me grab the right slide. This is the slide I'm supposed to be cleaning, the one without the halo. So you can see there's just a little bit of stuff right there. Wipes up pretty clean. And unlike the Mark III, there's not a lot of buildup down here. It's mostly just on the breech face. So I'm going to go ahead and take this bolt apart. Have you already removed the firing pin and cleaned the bolt? Nope, that's what I'm doing right now. And if you have, can you please do it again with a focus on removing and installing the firing pin? Yeah, let's do that right now. So let's go ahead and remove the recoil spring here. I think I can just push up on it from the bottom and then pull it out gently. Don't want anything to go flying. Alright, what's next here? And I think I can get this whole firing pin unit. You can see the polymer housing right here looking down from the top. We're going to come at it from the bottom. Let's go ahead and maybe push on the firing pin. Try and get this whole housing to come out. Let's see here. I'm somewhat new to the Victory, so bear with me here. I have been working on it, taking it apart. Let's see. But I know that I've popped this out before. There we go. So I'm just using my fingers and pulling on it here. I really wish that the Facebook Live was widescreen, because the 4x3, I've got a really narrow workspace. Let's see. Okay, well, I don't want to quit. I just want it to come out without a fight. I'm just wiggling it. There we go. So I'm grabbing it and wiggling it back and forth here. There we go. So this is the firing pin unit housing. You can see a little spring there, the little plastic detent. So we got that out. I'm going to push on the firing pin and listen for any kind of grittiness, which I don't hear any. So if I wanted to get really crazy with it, I could go ahead and drift this little pin out right here and then pull it out. So there's that pin. Here's our firing pin. And then we've got the spring and plunger still down in there. So let's go ahead and get this cleaned up. We'll pull out the extractor next. So let's get a clean firing pin here, or a clean Q-tip. So Q-tip is clean. Wipe up. Yep. Pretty dirty. Not too bad though. All right. Let's get a few more Q-tips going here. Another sip of the water. All right. So we got the Q-tip out of the housing, just making sure we get all the grime off of there. So now we will put it back into the housing with the open portion facing down. Let's go ahead and push that in there. Now we can take our pin, get it started, and then when we push on the firing pin, that channel will open up and we got it back together. Boom. So before we put that in, let's go ahead and clean out the rest of the bolt. So having over a brick of mixed ammo go through this, it's not all that dirty. It's pretty clean for how many rounds were put through it. I try and pay particular attention to this area right here, but since the firing pin's inside of a housing, it's really easy to get it clean because it doesn't build up in there. Let's see. Joe just said, just recently got back into target shooting and wanted to say thank you to you and TANDEMKROSS for all the great videos, for the upgrades I have done on my 2245 Light and 1022. The Smith & Wesson SW22 is now on my list. Well, that's great, Joe. I'm really glad you feel that way, and thank you for the thank you. Trying not to get lost in the sauce here. TANDEMKROSS does make some wonderful, cost-effective upgrades that are easy to install, and they even have a dude who makes some okay install videos. All right, here. So we're still working on the breech face. So one of the things that Smith & Wesson did was they designed this pistol to be very user-friendly. Now, some of you know about how hard it is to get an extractor out of a 2245 or a Buckmark, and you can see here that this is actually a little piece of plastic with a little square, and the idea is to be able to catch that with your fingernail and pull down and launch your extractor into oblivion. That was awesome. I'm not going to go chase it down. I'm going to try it again, and this time try not to launch it into oblivion. So let's pull back on that little square. We'll shake this extractor out. But I really did just launch that across the room. But luckily, boom. So there's the extractor, here's the plunger. It's actually metal, but they designed it so you can catch it with a fingernail. So let's set the extractor, the plunger, and pull this little spring out here. And then a mental note to go find that on the floor after this video is done, which is great. We'll find out if it's going to be a hide and seek champion. And somebody said, LOL, we have all done that. Yes. Can't tell you how many times I've caught myself down on my hands and knees, lights off, with a flashlight, looking for, oh geez, what's the worst one? Probably a detent for an AR-15, whether it be the safety detent or the takedown pins. So I'm going to behead a Q-tip here and get down inside of this channel and clean it. I wish you guys could talk back with live audio, that way you could say, you're not in frame, slow down. So John Alexander asked, does TANDEMKROSS offer a titanium firing pin for this yet? They do not offer it just yet. And thank you for the detailed takedown on the bolt, and in particular the firing pin. Awesome, well thank you. We do not have a titanium firing pin yet that I'm aware of. But that would be a great upgrade to this pistol. You know, it's got such a powerful mainspring and hammer that a titanium firing pin would just add to the amount of power it has to make a round go off. So you can see we're working on the bolt face here. Yeah, poor Q-tips. If anyone's ever tried a sonic cleaner on one of these, I'm really curious to know how it goes. I'm kind of old school and I just use Q-tips and gun oil. But I have tried a sonic cleaner at the gun shop, and for some things it's really awesome. I just wish you could drop the whole gun in there, leave it for an hour, and come back to a clean gun. Yeah, somebody just said they use a Ziploc bag to take things apart in so they don't lose stuff, and that's what I do usually as well. In fact, I think I did that on the previous episode of TKTV where we took down a 2245. But I guess I just got a little excited, forgot about my Ziploc bag, and sent the extractor into a low Earth orbit. So that'll be fun. Alright, so we've got this bolt about as clean as it's going to get here. I'm still working on the build-up right there. I don't really want to use a dental pick because it's kind of, you know, sharp. So maybe I'll just use a firing pin out of an AR-15 and just work around it here. Yeah, you can see I just scraped up the gunk. It's really important to get these little areas right here, because if there's a lot of buildup, it can result in malfunctions down the road. And it's hard to see it, so be sure to scrub in there and get all the buildup off of there. So let's go ahead and get this bolt back together, get this schmutz off of me. Alright, what should we do first? Let's go ahead and get the firing pin back in there. So I'm going to put the housing back in, start wiggling it. There we go. So we got the firing pin back in. Now for the extractor, let's go ahead and insert the spring. And the plunger, let me hit it with a Q-tip just once. Alright, now we can take the plunger, put it back into the cutout with the button facing up. And we didn't clean the extractor, so let's go ahead and do that. It's really important to have a really clean, dry extractor in your rimfire pistol. And when you pull out the extractor, you actually want to look at that edge. And you want to make sure that it's a sharp edge, because if you lose a corner, if it snaps off or rounds off, you could lose that entire extractor. And like what happened earlier when I launched it across the room, if this extractor breaks in half, it's going to launch that plunger and spring into oblivion as well. So you're going to have to buy 3 parts instead of 1. So whenever you take your gun apart, be sure to take a look at whatever you're pulling out. The firing pin, the extractor. So I've got the extractor. I'm going to push it back into the bolt here while pushing down. Let's hope that it goes over it here. There we go. There we go. So we got the plunger and the extractor back in, and it's working. It's got a good range of motion, so that's clean. So we've got the upper clean. Let's go ahead and look at the grip here. So because there's a mainspring down in the bottom here, let's go ahead and pull this hammer. Safety's on. No magazine. Pull the trigger. So if you just spray down inside of here, there's actually a mainspring, not unlike a 1911. So I don't want to spray a bunch of stuff in here and then have it sit upright and drain into there, because I don't think there's a drain hole in that mainspring. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip the gun upside down and spray into it. That way, whatever collects down in there won't collect down in there. You know what I mean? I will have to kind of flip it up like this, being careful not to drench it, but I do want to clean out all the stuff that's in there. Alright, let's get a rag here. Scoot this out of the way. Let's get some more Q-tips. And let's start working. Yeah, so I don't want to fill this gun up with gun oil. I really think that if you were spraying down inside of here, to some extent, you know, you could get some capture down at the bottom, and just don't want too much in there. So we're going to be cleaning the trigger bar here, which looks pretty clean. And I did not clean this gun after I put a brick through it, because this is the gun that we're using for the live event, and the grip is pretty clean. There's not a lot of stuff down in here. I'm really impressed. What that means to me is that this is a really solid design, because if the gun is loose, you know, it's going to have buildup everywhere, and that's not really the case with this. Everything's kind of encapsulated and closed, so there's not a lot of gunshot residue and powder making its way out of the receiver. Tyler Kidd just said he finished up his extended mag release and his mag bumper from TANDEMKROSS on his Ruger. That is awesome. There are a lot of wonderful parts out there for all these wonderful rimfire guns. And be sure that if you're using a Q-tip, that when you spin it, you're not getting a bunch of Q-tip fuzz stuck on everything, because that will cause problems down the road. You don't want to put stuffing inside of your gun. It's not a teddy bear. Let's go ahead and push the hammer back. See, there was no grittiness there whatsoever. Just do a little bit more cleanup here. It looks pretty good down inside of the mag well. Could be better. Yeah, somebody said 46 viewers, not bad. What's neat about this is it's going to be up for a couple of days, and like the first episode of TKTV, the first day I think it reached 1,200, and by day 3 it had reached like 4,000 people. Plus we're also going to put this on YouTube, so it'll be nice to have up there. But I do wish we had hundreds, but that's okay. You know, people have things to do. 9 o'clock at night, putting kids to bed. I'm actually on the West Coast in Washington State, so it's only 6 o'clock here. Alright, so that's pretty clean. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way. And the part that we didn't clean is the guide rod and recoil spring. This is really simple. In fact, this is one of the parts that I may end up polishing because that just helps make it easier to clean. Somebody's putting a bunch of TANDEMKROSS parts in their buck mark tomorrow. That'll be fun. Buck marks are interesting. Alright, so this spring here, you know, springs don't look like they're very dirty, but if you push a Q-tip through there, you'll actually see a lot of stuff come off. So I like to clean my recoil springs because this is one of the parts that's, you know, vital to the gun running properly. Some people use a toothbrush in some areas instead of a Q-tip. Those work really well. I would like to get some of those hard Q-tips, the specialty Q-tips. Alright, so we've got that back together. I'm actually going to put a drop of oil on here because it's really dry and it's kind of scraping. That feels a lot better. So now let's put this, ooh, don't hit the tripod. Let's put this back in our bolt. Let's see, I think it goes something like this. Maybe we should compress the spring, put it into the hole in the guide rod. No, that's going to be a mess. Okay. I just don't want to kink the spring. There we go. So we got the guide rod and recoil spring back in the slide. Why don't we go ahead and put it back together now? So we're going to do that trick that I showed you earlier. And like I said, it's kind of a paradigm shift of conventional gun reassembly. You know, it's not that it doesn't make sense, it's just a lot different than what people are used to. So let's see here. Put this back on the frame. We'll tilt it up like that. And actually, before we put it back together, put a drop of oil on these rails right here, because that's what these ride in. So now we will slip our receiver back over. There we go. There we go. Now we can take our takedown screw. When I put 57 magazines through this gun, I did have the upper come loose. So what competitive shooter Josh Hansen recommended is actually taking a rubber O-ring and putting it on this screw. Some people have been using a split ring washer from the hardware store, you know, a metal washer with a split in it, but I really like the idea of an O-ring because it's not too aggressive with the amount of force it's putting back on that screw. So I will end up probably getting a 1911 grip screw bushing and put that on here just to help it stay together. Let's go ahead and snug this down. It doesn't need to be too crazy, but we do want it snug. Let's see what John Alexander said here. He says, I have shot my SW22 a lot, and it did start to get several failures to fire on a recent trip to the range, and I believe the main reason was a dirty firing pin. That is why I wanted you to do a detailed takedown for everyone after cleaning and very lightly oiling the firing pin and making sure no frog lube. Ah, frog lube, the magic word. So I've had some bad luck with frog lube just because at first I didn't know how to use it. I did use it for about a year, and then I just ended up going back to traditional gun oil because I did have it congeal on me during a winter match, and it completely deadlined my gun. So right now we've got the Victory back together, and now I'm going to do a function test before we move on to cleaning the magazines. So I'm getting 2 snap caps here. This did get dry fired about a dozen times since I've opened it, got it out of the box, and I have not seen a firing pin indent on the chamber. So I don't know what the final word is on being dry fire safe, but as a rule of thumb, I try not to dry fire any of my rimfire guns. So we're going to insert a magazine with snap caps, put one in the chamber. We'll go ahead and remove the magazine and show the magazine disconnect removal, what it does, pointing in a safe direction. Pull the trigger and hold it, click. So we'll rack it. We're going to put another snap cap in there. Listen for the trigger reset, click, and pull it again in a safe direction. Alright, so the pistol's back together, it's working properly. So now, let's go ahead and clean a magazine. The magazines, I do believe, are kind of the weak link for the SW22, and I'm going to be working on a way to tune them to get them to run more reliably. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the base plate, and the way that I do it is I just take a non-marring tool, insert it like so, throw it all around. I do not know the size of the split ring washer that's needed, but what I would do is just take that screw to the hardware store and get one that fits around it. It would really be helpful to take a pair of calipers and mic this hole so you know if it fits around the screw, that you also need to be mindful of how big it needs to be for fitting in here. But I do not know the answer to that offhand, but the info is out there. I do believe there's quite a few YouTube videos about it. I think Anthony Cruz from the Shooter's Mindset actually told the audience what size of split ring washer is needed to accomplish this. So for the magazines, I like to get a Q-tip and put a bend in it so I can insert it through the hole here and clean. You can see that it's getting down to the side there. Do I like Slip 2000? I haven't tried it enough to know if I like it or not. I think I do have a bottle of it sitting around here somewhere. But the market is flooded with all different kinds of gun oils, frog lube, CLP, all that stuff. I'm not really picky when it comes to cleaning products. I'll use whatever's in stock and whatever's the most cost effective. I really do like Breakthrough's products. I'm also sponsored by them. They've really got it down to a science, and it's also the only lube that's mentioned by name in the manual for the M134 minigun. So, they went from military to private sector and took all their science and knowledge with them. So they do make an outstanding gun oil and solvent that has almost no scent whatsoever. Yep. And old school Hoppies works great too. I hate saying it out loud because I always think I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Is it hops? Is it hoppies? Alright, so this magazine is pretty clean. If you feel like you might have missed a spot cleaning the magazine body, what I like to do is just get some cloth and run it through there. Be sure that if you're using something metal to run it up the magazine, that you don't gouge anything. And I like to keep a firing pin around because it's a useful tool. And it's just fun. So that magazine body is really clean. Let's go ahead and look at the follower here. We do have a little bit of stuff on the follower. Let's go ahead and get that off. And while we're at it, I might as well clean the spring. Boop. I think the Smith & Wesson magazines are, somebody asked, why do you think the Smith & Wesson magazines are a weak point? I'm having an issue that I had on my other Victory where it would go bang, then click, and it would fail to load the second round off of a magazine, and I think that might be due to not enough upward tension pushing the rounds up the magazine body. And that could be from a multitude of things. If this is too short fore and aft, the rounds could actually be physically running into the wall here. Or if the follower has some flash on it, it could be causing some drag. But I do believe that if the magazines were tuned up, that the gun would run a lot more reliably. The magazines are a heartbeat of the gun. You know, I use a 2245, and one of the things that really makes that gun run the way that it does is having tuned magazines. So I'm not sure. The racetrack doesn't feel too sharp, but that doesn't mean it could be not causing friction. So let's go ahead and pull this down. We'll take the follower. Why don't we put a drop of oil on that guy? So the follower and the racetrack look pretty solid, but the gun is so solidly built that I do think it's the mags that are causing the issues intermittently. So for reassembly, let's go ahead and compress this spring as much as we can. We will pull it down with a tool. Then we'll get the magazine base. You'll see that it's got some grooves in it. So what we're going to do is actually put those grooves inside of the base there. And we'll let this go. And, you know, the bases just kind of slide around. I'm not super fond of that, but could be worse. But what's actually keeping the base plate on is the magazine spring itself. But the way they made these, it's going to be really easy to create an aftermarket magazine bumper. So that's good. We'll wiggle it around till it catches and pull down on it. Do you have a video on tuning 24? Do you have a video of tuning 2245 magazines? Yes, we do. If you go over to TANDEMKROSS's YouTube channel, there is a video showing all the steps needed to tune a 2245 magazine. It's a really in-depth video that really makes a big difference. So let's look at our other magazines here, make sure the followers are on the right side. And these magazines do fit in the TANDEMKROSS quick grips. They're a little snug, but they do their job. These are really great because you can put them on your hip. They're modular, they snap together, and they also account for curves. So it can go around your hip, it can be flat. These are really great. Alright, let's quit hitting the camera here. Alrighty, that is one clean Smith & Wesson SW22. Not too bad at all. I really I love the Williams fire sights on these, and they're actually real Williams sights. Williams is also another one of my sponsors, and they make fiber optic sights for a lot of different guns, kind of an aftermarket upgrade, but this thing comes right out of the box with a set of Williams fire sights already installed. So this is a really wonderful gun, especially for shooting limited. And then if you want to get a little wild with it, you can go ahead and get the threaded version. You run a compensator on there. Game Changer works outstanding on this. Great little gun. This one needs to be cleaned too. Look at that. What's in there? I don't know what that is. It looks like kitty litter. And I don't have cats, so... Did you show how to put the bolt back in if you have the halo mounted? I did. I can go over that again because this gun is so easy to break down and I need the experience. So let's go ahead and take this apart. Snap. Take the takedown screw, pull that out, pull the upper off. If you've ever owned a Mark III, you know how horrible it can be to get that gun back together and working properly. So here's a bolt with the halo installed, and what we're going to do our paradigm shift, that's the term we're using. I'm going to put the bolt on the frame. Having some technical difficulties. There we go. So now we've got the bolt on, and we're going to tip it up a little bit. The halo actually helps because it gives you a little platform to push down on. Now we can take our receiver and slide it over the bolt. And now we've got it back together. Let's go ahead and put our takedown screw. I haven't tried a different barrel on a different grip, kind of, you know, mix and matching, but I imagine that it's going to work just fine. Don't take my word for it yet, though, as I have not tried it, but I've done it on a 2245 before, and it did just fine. So this is our bolt that does not have an extractor. If you were here for that, I launched it into oblivion. I'll find it later. But it's very simple to put the bolt back on, put the gun back together with the halo installed. That is a question that we get rather frequently because it can be kind of difficult to put it back on, but I don't believe it's the halo's fault. I think it's just the way this gun goes together and the different contact points at the front and rear. Where can I get the video of the 2245 redo? I do believe under TANDEMKROSS's YouTube channel there is a lot of 2245 videos, and if you're talking about the mag tuning video, that's under TANDEMKROSS's YouTube channel. There's also a lot of 2245 stuff on my personal channel too, the Lawson 11B one. So let's go ahead and drop this hammer. TANDEMKROSS's YouTube channel. Yep. Alright, so just for fun, why don't we turn the standard Victory into a threaded Victory. We can go ahead and I also have the 2245 I compete with here on the table if anyone wants to take a peek at that. It's nice to have options when you're shooting matches, and I also bring backup guns just in case one of my guns takes a dive. You know, I've got another 2245 or a Buckmark, so I can run a completely different gun. There we go. So now we just turned a standard SW22 into a threaded version. Thank you for the great live feed on the takedown and all the information on the SW22. This has quickly made its way to one of my favorite rimfire semi-autos. Well, thank you, John. That means a lot. Alright, we've got quite a mess, but it's out of frame, so you guys can't see it. I think that covers everything Smith & Wesson Victory related for today. Does anybody have any questions or want me to cover anything before we end this live transmission? This was a lot easier than I thought it'd be, thanks to the Smith & Wesson being very simple to take apart, clean, and put back together. You know, just for reference sake, here's my 2245. Has the Stripling Custom Gunworks 90-degree Seymour mount, Game Changer compensator, the Williams fiber optic sights, the Victory trigger, extended magazine release, the Cane Wolf. And I'll show you how difficult it is to take this gun apart. So let's go ahead and do a chamber check. We're empty here. Pull the trigger in a safe direction. So now we have to pull out the mainspring. Pull this out. It doesn't want to come out, of course. There we go. Now we can pull the bolt out. Now we have to separate the grip from the barrel. So we got that guy apart. We also have the Stripling Custom Gunworks thumb rest on here, also known as a gas pedal. Really helps, especially when you're running an optic. And this gun has not been cleaned since the last match I shot, so let's just pretend I cleaned it, and now we will put it back together. So you have to take the grip and put it onto the receiver, like so, and then you have to smack the muzzle. Smack, smack. All right, is that far enough? We'll find out here in a second. You can also push on a hard surface and push it down. Hey, that's cool. Who's that guy? All right, so now we can take the bolt, put it back in. Now we have to take the mainspring, put that back in. Doesn't want to go, of course. Usually I have something to wrap on it with. Let's try. There we go. So now you can see the recoil rod does not want to move out of the way, so we have to take something, push on it, push up on this at the same time. There we go. So this does have the TANDEMKROSS hammer bushing installed, so we can pull the trigger and this should fall into place here. And now pull that latch. If you don't close this under tension, you're going to have a dead gun, so you have to tip it up, give it a little wiggle. Now we can feel the tension right there, so we'll push that down and close it. Now do a safety check, function test. So you can see that that's a little bit more involved than the Smith & Wesson. You know, for reference, let's go ahead and take this one apart. Empty chamber, cool. So take our takedown screw, back it out. So when I first saw this gun, I thought it was kind of clunky and quirky, but after I started shooting it, I realized that Smith & Wesson really designed this as the pistol with the lowest learning curve for disassembly and reassembly. So we already have this gun taken apart. Let's say we cleaned it. Now let's put it back together. There we go. Take the takedown screw, put it back in there, and let's say you were trying to pick a gun to start getting into competitive shooting with, and you don't have a 22-45 or a Buckmark or a Victory. You know, this might be a selling point to someone who wants to get into competitive shooting but doesn't have the time or energy to dedicate to, you know, tearing down a gun, because some of these guns, like the Ruger, cleaning it can qualify as gunsmithing. So it's nice to have something that's so intuitive and user-friendly. So we got that together. We got that apart and back together pretty quickly. Just doing a function test. There we go. Good to go. You can tell that the Smith & Wesson SW22, I don't want to say was inspired by the 22-45 and the Buckmark, but it does have some similarities between both the Buckmark and the 22-45. But taking them apart, you know, it's not a clone. You know, they're not at risk for getting involved in a lawsuit because it really is its own design. And it's a very interesting and unique and fast gun. I'm starting to like it more and more because of how easy it is to disassemble, clean, and reassemble. And I'm really looking forward to future upgrades coming out and making the install videos, because install videos can be difficult to make when the gun's fighting you, and this is going to make it so I'm on easy street. Are you using Ruger mags or Mech-Gar for competition in the 22-45? I'm using factory magazines. Let's see. They're actually within arm's reach here. So I use Ruger factory magazines, and I've actually removed the followers on these. That does give you more upward spring tension. It just makes it harder to load because you can't thumb down the button. So what you actually have to do is kind of stick a tool in there and then pull it down like so. Just something I'm trying out. I did shoot a match with the 2245 with no followers, and they ran 100%. So I do believe that helped. You got a TANDEMKROSS mag bumper on here. And then the Buckmark magazine. It's got the TANDEMKROSS Buck Pro base pad on there. You can see these magazine bodies are, you know, pretty stout. The Buckmark, probably the most solidly designed. 2245 right behind it. And then you have the SW22 mags. They're a little bit simpler, not as robust. Actually, that's not true. I think they're just as robust. It looks like they did some kind of sonic weld, not unlike the 2245 and Buckmark. But these base pads I'm not a big fan of, and you know, the reliability issues that I've had, they're small, but I do believe they're from the magazines. So I will be finding a way to tune these, whether it be polishing the button or polishing the racetrack, but we're going to come up with a fix to make these magazines run as good as a tuned 2245 magazine. Somebody was asking about why did I remove the mag interlock. I believe, now this is just my personal opinion, but I believe that a magazine disconnect makes the gun more unsafe. If you have ever taken apart a 2245 that does not have a hammer bushing installed, that still has the magazine release, the magazine safety disconnect in there, what you have to do to take this gun down is actually, you know, inspect the chamber and then insert a magazine and pull the trigger, bang, click, whatever. And then when you're putting the gun back together, you know, let's see here. So now we've got the mainspring up like this. In order to get this to come down, the trigger has to be pulled, and in order to do that, you have to insert a magazine and then pull the trigger, and this will fall into place, and you have to move it out of the way. I think that it kind of takes away from the safety, because what happens if you just got back from the range and this was a loaded magazine and you had to put a magazine in there to pull the trigger, but you know, you accidentally put one in the chamber and then just put a hole through your ceiling. Removing the magazine safety disconnect makes things more simpler, in my opinion. You pull the trigger, it goes bang. And for the most part, when you remove the magazine disconnect out of a pistol, it actually makes it have a better trigger pull. You know, that bar you could see was actually pulling down on the trigger bar, so it is going to affect the trigger pull in some kind of way. So removing that kind of makes things more simple, especially for a gun that requires trigger pulls to break it down, like the 2245. Let's see. How does the spring in the Victory mag compare to the spring in the others? Well, let's take a look. Pull this off of here. So this is one of these kinds of springs. And then we'll look at a 2245 and Mark III spring. And if you've seen those before, you know that they're these kind of springs. And then the Buckmark, I don't know if I have all the tools I need right here to look at a Buckmark spring. Let's see. I think I do. I think I can just pull the follower all the way down and then pull it out. Ouchies. So there is the Buckmark spring. Here is the Ruger spring. And then here is the Victory spring. So it's a different design. And I don't know if there's a way to retroactively make these magazines accept one of these kinds of springs. Maybe that'll help, maybe not, I'm not sure. But I know that I see a lot of these magazine springs more often than I see these magazine springs. Let's see. Now let's try and put all these back together. Buckmark follower. So let's see, something like that. Yep. So let's put the spring back in here. think the Buckmark spring is probably the stoutest, and then followed by the 2245, and then the Victory. So let's see, what can we do to pull this down all the way? Maybe take our handy dandy firing pin, and pull that down, down. Yeah, so I do believe that the magazines are the culprit for the reliability in the Smith & Wesson, but you know, for a gun that's brand new to the market, I think it's doing pretty well, and it's only going to get better over time. Let's go ahead and pull this down, get on top of the follower like so, and we'll put this back in here. If I don't put all these back together right now, who knows what will happen. So there's the Buckmark magazine. Let's go ahead and do the 2245. I really like my 2245 magazines because I've tuned them so they are just buttery smooth. But if you don't have the magazines running good, it's going to affect the reliability of your gun. Try and do this without kinking the spring. There we go. Put the follower back on. You see the base pads on these magazines, pretty stout. And then you look at the base pads for the Smith & Wesson, and these really remind me of the 22A magazines. They're almost identical, but the mag catch is actually in a different location, and the base pads are kind of different. So I don't think that the magazines for the Victory are a fail at all. I just think that there's got to be a way to make them run a little bit more reliably. And one of the things that I do is I actually take the follower out of the gun, out of the magazine. So what happens when you take the follower out of the magazine, you increase the amount of upward spring tension, but you also lose your last round hold open feature. So now we have no follower in this magazine. The upward tension is a lot more than if the follower was in there. So in order to load these, I'm going to have to put a tool in here and pull down like so. And what that means for the gun is after I extinguish the magazine, the bolt hold open feature is gone. So you're going to be dry firing the gun a lot, which may or may not be bad for it. The follower on the magazine, you know, it helps to load it by thumbing it down and pulling it down. But what it also does is when it's inside of the gun, it pushes up on the bolt catch. Ooh, sorry about that. It pushes up on the bolt catch, so you extinguish the magazine and the follower pushes up on this to lock it open. So I've been trying out magazines without a follower, and as long as you don't empty the entire magazine, it does increase the amount of spring tension. But like I said, since that button's not in there, it's not going to push up on the bolt catch. So, you know, just trying new things. It's part of being a competitive shooter, is tuning your gear and figuring out what works the best. Tom asks, do you know what aftermarket parts TANDEMKROSS will be making for the Victory? Yes, I do. Right now we have the halo for the slide and the compensator for the barrel, threaded 1/2x28. As far as the upcoming upgrades, I'm not able to talk about those just yet. It's kind of something that, you know, that can't really talk about till it's time to talk about it. Shh, it's top secret, exactly, yep. So, part of me being able to do what I do with TANDEMKROSS and with other companies, if I talk about everything that's coming out, I won't be able to do what I do. Part of being in the industry is, you know, not disclosing what may or may not be coming out. So I wish I could tell you, you know, but it's going to be awesome. There's going to be a lot of great upgrades coming out. So let's see here. Let me see if there's any other questions I can go over here. Somebody said that the springs look very different in the magazines. That's true. Alrighty guys, well I think we covered everything that we could possibly cover with the Smith & Wesson SW22 Victory in regards to disassembly, reassembly, cleaning, and removing the magazine safety disconnect, as well as, what else? What is the most dependable ammo you've used with the Victory? Anything CCI. CCI makes exceptional ammo, and when it comes to competitions, I run CCI standard velocity. If I can't get my hands on that, I'll be running Gemtech Silencer Subsonic, which is also made by CCI. For practice ammo, I run Aguila most of the time because of how cheap it is. Federal also makes some good stuff, but the ammunition that I depend on is CCI. You know, my defensive 22 ammo, I know that's kind of a funny term to say defensive 22 ammo, but it's CCI, whether it's the Stingers or the Velocitors or the Mini Mags, they always go bang. I mean, that is some really good ammo. Charles says, tell TANDEMKROSS to make a magwell and a floor plate. That would be great. Floor plate magwell would be pretty cool. Let's see, what else we got? When will the upgrades be coming out? Somebody asked. Soon! I hope they build a kit to lighten up the trigger pull, get it down to 2 pounds. I would like that too. In fact, I let somebody borrow my what's it called? The tool that you use to figure out how heavy the trigger is. I do believe that the trigger on this is about, I want to say 5.5 pounds. Let's see. Well, let's see. When will silver Victory Halo rings be available? I do believe pretty shortly. I guess they must be pretty popular because they do color coordinate with the upper. I wasn't aware that they were out of stock, and they should be coming out here pretty shortly. Well guys, thank you for all the wonderful feedback, all the great questions. Sorry for the little hiccup we had starting off with a weak connection and then, you know, kind of starting a few minutes late, but that's just how it goes. I'm glad that the stream didn't get interrupted, and I really appreciate everybody checking this out. This is our second episode of TKTV. We would really love to hear what you guys would like to see for the third episode. That'll be coming out here probably in a couple weeks. You know, we like to keep them coming. But yeah, you know, be sure to tell people about TANDEMKROSS and check out this video and leave some feedback for us, what you'd like to see next, because, you know, we're here to serve you guys, TANDEMKROSS as well as myself. If you guys ever need any kind of tech support, whether it's official going through TANDEMKROSS or unofficial, you know, feel free to drop me a line. I'm on Facebook as Brian Lawson, Lawson11B, and, you know, I do tech support for TANDEMKROSS, but I also do tech support for everybody. Everybody comes at me with interesting questions and how to upgrade stuff, so feel free to reach out to me if you want to get into competitive shooting or you're looking into your first gun. You know, that's what I'm here for, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, thank you guys. So, as always guys, thanks for watching and keep shooting. And if you are just tuning in now and you missed this video, later today or possibly tomorrow morning, we'll have taken this video and downloaded it and then put it up on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to check it out later, and I'll be able to look at it and laugh at myself about all the things I screwed up, like launching an extractor into oblivion. So thank you guys. Thank you TANDEMKROSS for giving me this opportunity to do another episode of TKTV. And thank you to my other sponsors like Hollow Sun and Breakthrough and Williams and Striplin Custom Gunworks. I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing if it wasn't thanks to you guys. And TANDEMKROSS made all of that happen, as well as putting in some hard work. So thank you guys. And like I said, keep shooting. The future of sports, shooting sports as a whole, depends on it. So you guys have a good night. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.